Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, the best place to get all of your Eagles and NFL related news. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in our next week of free agency with plenty of big moves still happening, plenty of small moves still happening, especially on the Eagles side, which we will get into in a little bit here. But before we get started, I just want to ask you guys to please leave a like and subscribe down below. Maybe even leave a comment if you enjoyed the video. That would be much appreciated, showing your support, and it'll definitely help me come up with new ideas to continue to develop this show and keep it, interesting. I'm just going to say off the bat that this episode is probably going to be a little bit more laid back. It's probably going to be a bit more maybe underwhelming, you could say. It's going to be less, it's not going to be as big. It might be shorter in time because there's not a whole lot of concrete NFL news happening around the league right now. Obviously, there are still big things happening. They're just not, they're not affecting teams at the minute. We'll get into it. There are contract situations that will impact the, other players down the line. So, with all that being said, let's jump right into one of the bigger Eagles news that happened yesterday. That being the retiring of Eagles legend and Philadelphia sports legend, two-time Super Bowl champion Brandon Graham announced his retirement yesterday, and although I'm still upset, this is a guy that I've watched his career develop, especially in the latter half where he aged like wine, whereas many defensive players taken in the same draft as him or around the same time have either fell off a cliff, retired at their lowest, whereas Brandon Graham, he's able to retire right off of winning a Super Bowl, and he gets to go out as one of the greatest, at least one of the most accomplished Philadelphia sports legends throughout the entire history of any Philadelphia sport. I mean, overall, it's hard for me to say because I've definitely been critical of him throughout his career, especially early on. But I'm happily proven wrong at this point. At this point in his career, and overall, it's interesting. I mean, looking at some of his, he has 76 and a half regular season sacks in his time here in the NFL. Looking sacks, if we're looking at it, he had some up and down years, obviously. He had possibly one of the greatest Eagles moments of their entire history, that being the strip sack on Tom Brady back in Super Bowl 52 to help secure the game at that point. Looking at some of his total tackle, I guess what is that? Forced, did he force that many? Okay, forced fumbles, he has about 23 career forced fumbles. And I think he has about total, let's see, total tackles, he has about 454 career total tackles. He also holds the record for longest tenure as a Philadelphia Eagle, that being at 15 years at this point, which will most likely be broken by Lane Johnson by the time Lane Johnson retires, but that's besides the point anyway. But Brandon Graham is the longest tenured Eagle at 15 years. He is also, I believe, longest consecutive, I feel like or most game appearances by a single Eagles player. It's not consecutive, that's Jason Kelce, but the most amount of in-game start appearances by a single player for the Eagles is held by Brandon Graham as well. I've definitely, especially in the latter half of his career, from Super Bowl 52 and onwards, I've definitely haven't been as critical on Brandon Graham, knowing his potential, knowing who he is, what he brings to the table, and bringing that veteran presence that I hope has rubbed off on some of the other guys, like a Nolan Smith, maybe a J.X. Hunt, guys like that are a little bit more underrated, especially on the Eagles. But Brandon Graham embodies what Philadelphia is. Hardworking, you start from the bottom, and you work hard to get to the top and to win. He started off as, I want to say, a third stringer back in 2010. He started off as like a third stringer, fourth stringer, and he worked his way to be a two-time Super Bowl champion for a team that had never seen a Super Bowl win prior to that, even with multiple Super Bowl appearances before that. Was there not any adversity? Of course there was some adversity, especially when he tore his ACL or his Achilles, I forget. Brandon Graham Achilles? Yeah, I think he tore his... Yeah, he ruptured his Achilles back in 2021, early in the season as well, ending his entire season. He's obviously he retore his tricep in the Super Bowl, probably leading to the decision that he needs to preserve his body at this point to enjoy his time with his children as a whole. Obviously, we're going to see Brandon Graham around Philly a lot. He embodies what Philly is, that hardworking, starting from the bottom and clawing your way to the top to become a legend around, becoming a man, becoming a legend among men. And overall, I am proud to say that Brandon Graham is probably want to become, especially in the latter half of his career, when we could see how much of a character he is when he chirps at other teams. I'm proud to say that he's probably been one of my favorite Philly sports athletes of all time to watch, growing up and even now. And it is a little bit upsetting that I'll never be able to see Brandon Graham play at 100% again. But it's also it's bittersweet. I don't get to see him play again, but he gets to retire on top, and I get to remember him as not this guy that took a step back in his last year, but this guy that came back through injury to play his last game in the Super Bowl and secure Philadelphia's second ever Super Bowl over the so-called Chiefs dynasty. So, yeah. Thank you, Brandon Graham. I know you're never going to hear this. I wish you did, but you mean a lot to the city. You mean a lot to me, and you mean a lot to the Philadelphia Eagles organization as a whole. And I hope to see you around the organization every once in a while when you get the chance. But feel free; it's your time to ride off into the sunset and enjoy the rest of your life. Next up, sticking on Eagles legends, or to be Eagles legends once he retires, that being Eagles right tackle Lane Johnson, signed an extension through 2027 with an additional $30 million in guarantees. So over the next 2 years, or not next 2 years, but the final 2 years, 2026 through 2027, and 2027 through 2028, we are going to owe Lane Johnson around $40 million. Hey, he deserves it. He's an Eagles legend, and I'm glad that we're not losing Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce in one season, then Brandon Graham the next season, and then Lane Johnson the following season. I'm glad to see that we got a deal done. We see arguably the greatest, well, definitely the greatest right tackle in NFL history, but arguably the greatest tackle in all of NFL history sign another deal to come back with the Eagles. I do feel like eventually we're going to have to draft a guy to be his backup. I do feel like that's why we got Tyler Steen initially. But after all that fell through, I wouldn't be surprised if Lane Johnson, we draft a guy maybe next year, maybe the following year to back up Lane Johnson. Exactly what we did with Jason Kelce and Cam Jurgens. So, congratulations to Lane Johnson, and it's going to be nice to have our right side of our line secured for a couple more years. Next. All right. I do want to talk about Mekhi Becton. Mekhi Becton, unfortunately, did not re-sign with the Philadelphia Eagles. Unfortunately, I wish that contract money. Let's see. So it's currently being reported as a two-year, $20 million deal, probably guaranteed with the Chargers, with some extra money in incentives. Could the Eagles have done this? Yes. But as I'm going to get into in a second here with most likely our game plan going forward, especially the next year or two, it probably wouldn't have been the smartest idea. We have a Tyler Steen. We now have a Kenyon Green. We have a Trevor Keegan. All these guys are going to be competing for this for this starting right guard spot. Currently, in my opinion, it's Tyler Steen's job to lose. My dark horse is probably Trevor Keegan steps up and maybe steals the starting role away from Tyler Steen, depending on how training camp goes, and depending on how the draft goes. I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles draft one or two O linemen that can play both left guard, right guard, center, something like that, in the late rounds, especially when we have like 4 fifth-round picks this draft. I wouldn't be surprised if we traded a few of those, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we picked up one or two offensive linemen that Jeff Stoutland can really try to develop. And Kenyon Green, although I'm not totally high on him, I definitely want to see more out of him, especially through training camp and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised if he's also competitive with that spot, but it all really comes down to how Tyler Steen really shows himself, especially in that preseason training camp area. So the Eagles, especially, of course, after last episode, after I recorded everything, the Eagles did pick up their first outside free agent. That, obviously, we covered the fact that they picked up Dorian Thompson-Robinson in a trade with the Browns, picked up Kenyon Green, as we just said, from a trade with the Texans. But we also picked up A.J. Dillon last Wednesday on a one-year deal. I forget how much money it was. It really wasn't that much. It was like $2.5 million to be our backup running back. A.J. Dillon, otherwise known as Quadzilla, the Quad Father, whatever you want to call him, him and Saquon Barkley in the same backfield is a solid 1-2 punch. A.J. Dillon, especially early in his career, was a second-round draft pick, and the Packers really tried to heavily rely on him more than they probably should have, especially with an injured Aaron Jones. Do I feel like a fresh start would be good for A.J. Dillon? Yes. He's coming off of a neck injury. Apparently, he said it must have been a pretty bad stinger. He was not able to play any of the season last season, so his body's pretty fresh. It gives us a solid workhorse behind Saquon if we need to give Saquon a breather. And it gives us a solid 1-2 punch. Saquon is the speed. A.J. Dillon can be the power back. But now imagine A.J. Dillon and Saquon Barkley behind Jalen Hurts. Mind you, A.J. Dillon can squat like 500 pounds. Saquon can squat 700. Jalen can squat 600. Imagine like 1,800 pounds being pushed up against you. That is amazing to me. And the fact that we're able to get a solid running back Have I been high on in the past on A.J. Dillon? No, but he also hasn't shown me anything to be that high on him. So I definitely want to see how he develops and how he acts, especially in training camp this season. Probably my second favorite signing here would be the Eagles agreeing to terms on a 1-year cheap deal with outside linebacker Joshua Uche. Uche was with the Chiefs last season. He was a solid player, not great. He really took a step back from his 2023 campaign up at New England, where he put up, I want to say it was like 16 and a half sacks in a single season. So, especially under this Vic Fangio defense, I definitely want to see how Vic Fangio uses him, what packages he uses him, what schemes does he try to fit him into. It's a solid depth, especially at the edge position, outside linebacker position. I wouldn't be surprised if we pick up even more pieces at this position, but Joshua Uche is definitely going to have a solid chance at seeing some playing time, especially if the Eagles are not as high on Bryce Huff as I think that they might be, especially this coming season. So let's knock out the two tight ends. We have Kylen Granson, a tight end from the Colts, knows Nick Sirianni's system, especially he's an older tight end, a solid pass catcher, not a good deep threat, but solid in the flat and a stick. A comeback route, pretty good at those, pretty good at sideline catches as well. Knows Nick Sirianni's system when Sirianni was OC at the Colts. And where's the other guy? Harrison Bryant, tight end, both on one. I believe Harrison was on a 1 year, or Kylen. Yeah, both of these guys are on 1-year deals. Harrison Bryant and Kylen Granson. One of these guys I don't think is making the roster, but it's definitely going to be solid competition. And as a whole, it's going to add good depth. And it's going to add some age to this tight end room. Both are good pass catchers. Both could improve in the run blocking situation. But as of right now, this seems like a solid 2 pickup. I figured I'd put these guys together because they're quite similar. It's a solid pickup of both these guys for the Eagles. We also picked up, who was it? Outside linebacker Patrick Johnson. He was with the Eagles this past offseason, especially through training camp. He got cut, and then he went to the Giants. He performed pretty well in the preseason. I'd be interested to see how he performs, especially with the lack of depth at the edge position. Again, like I said, with Josh Uche. I wouldn't be surprised if he's contending for a 53-man roster spot. And I also wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on our practice squad. But as a whole, for some reason, they seem quite high on Patrick Johnson, and he seemed pretty solid. So I'd like to see how he performs in training camp and how he's able to push himself, especially with competition like Josh Uche. We picked up ex-Giants corner Adoree Jackson to a 1-year deal. I pray to God that he is like the second coming of Christ, and we steal 2 really amazing players away from the Giants, and we just prove that it's the Giants organization that ruined players like Saquon and Adoree Jackson. Can I guarantee that? No. Hell no, I cannot guarantee that. But what I can do is it's going to add depth to that corner room. It's going to add some veteran prowess to that corner room and or defensive backs room as a whole, but it's also going to add a solid option across from Guantanamo Bay there, Quinyon Mitchell. It's going to add a solid option, a solid guy that might be good, might be bad. It's more of just a wait and see how he performs during training camp. All right, so they did sign a long snapper, Charlie Hewlett. I just want to cover this real quick. Rick Lovato, it seems like, is not going to be returning after being one of the few players that played in both Eagles Super Bowl winning teams, which is unfortunate. He's been here pretty long, but he's the past season. Apparently, he's been off a little bit, which is why Jake Elliott has been struggling. If you can't get the long snap good, then you can't get the set good. If you can't get the set good, then you can't get the kick good. So it's unfortunate to see him go. He was a veteran guy on this Eagles team, but oh well. Bring in Charlie Hewlett, and let's see if things can get better for Jake the Make Elliott. Let's see. Okay, so my favorite pickup from this past week, which happened out of the blue, and I literally jumped out of my seat when I saw this. The Eagles picked up Azeez Ojulari. Sorry, it's going to take me a couple of weeks to get this, guys. Trust me. Azeez Ojulari. He's a really good outside linebacker. Obviously, he was with the Houston Texans. He was the one that put the dirty hit on Trevor Lawrence. Yes, I know. But if the Eagles can put some reins on him and control him just a little bit so he doesn't go absolutely berserk, I wouldn't hate that. This is a really solid pickup, a really under-the-radar pickup for the entire free agency. We agreed to a one-year deal. Again, a cheap one-year deal, and we'll get into why that is in a minute here. But get into one of these cheap deals, and then he should be an outstanding player. He should have a chip on his shoulder trying to prove something, especially after failing to really prove himself with the Houston Texans. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a solid breakout season from Azeez Ojulari, rushing across from Jalen Hunt or Nolan Smith, depending on what the package is that Vic Fangio needs. So this brings up the question, why are the Eagles signing all these guys to cheap one-year deal? Why aren't they signing some of these guys, like guys that I'm high on, like Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche, to longer than maybe a 2-year deal, a couple $1 million guaranteed? Well, the Eagles are most likely looking to belly up a lot of cash over the next 3 seasons, especially to a lot of their rookie guys, a lot of their younger guys, Reed Blankenship, Quinyon Mitchell, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Jalen Hunt, Cooper DeJean, who also, I'm forgetting somebody else, maybe even a Sidney Brown if he plays well enough at the safety position. Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis. We're going to have to belly up. Some of these guys obviously won't be with us next. Not all of those guys will be with us in the next 5, 6 years. But some of those guys could become lifelong Eagles like a Jalen Carter. But we're going to have to belly up a lot of money for that. I mean, currently looking at some of the, let me look at, who was it? They just had it right here. Let's see. So, Derek Stingley, corner on the Texans, signed a record-setting deal for, I think it was it 3 years, $30 million per year, so around $90 million. He's number one on the corner market, and he hasn't really even proved himself yet. J.C. Horn, similar, 3 years, $25 million per year. Both of these guys are young, but both of them are really solid pieces on these teams' defenses. We look at all the guys that we have coming up. The non-quarterback market keeps going up and up. I mean, if you look at the newest deal by Ja'Marr Chase, which we'll break down in a second here, he just set the record for most money in a contract going to a non-quarterback player at $161 million. All these prices are inflating, and the Eagles are looking to sign their guys next year, I feel like. It looks like they're going to want to sign a lot of the Philly dogs, get them to come back, and they're going to have to wait on Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell for a little while before they can get them to longer-term deals in which then they can start manipulating the money, and then they'll have an easier time with the flow. So sign a lot of these 1 year older guys, and fill in some spots and rely on these cores on both the offense, which really hasn't changed that much, and the defense. So that is currently why the Eagles have not been doing too many big blockbuster deals, is we're trying to save money, even in areas where I totally agree Mekhi Becton deserved the money. I wish we gave him the money. But if we're looking towards the future, if we're looking to sustain the success that we've been having, especially over the next decade, let's say. I'm not even going to say we're going to win a Super Bowl in the next decade. Do I believe we are? Yes. But does locking down all these players mean we are? No. So I do feel like with the market of non-quarterbacks skyrocketing, especially this season or this offseason, I'm not surprised that the Eagles are signing cheap one-year deals with guys that have a decent amount of value but need to prove themselves and could reset their own market if they go to the Eagles and perform highly and the Eagles go deep in the playoffs. So, with all that being said, that is the Eagles' plans, ladies and gentlemen. It's sign these older veterans or guys that have been around the league to one-year deals, cheap, so we can prepare for next season where we're going to have to pay out a lot of our rookie and younger guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball. All right, so that is that. Speaking on some of Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins deals, the Bengals reached a deal with Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins at the same time. Ja'Marr Chase got signed to a 4-year, $161 million deal that includes $112 million guaranteed. And Higgins agreed to a 4-year deal, $115 million, with the first 2 years guaranteed with the money. So the Bengals, and they're currently also talking to Trey Hendrickson, I believe, as well. But the Bengals are clearly setting themselves up to bring back their core and try to build around the draft, which they have sucked at, especially if they are not within the top 5 picks. But this is a solid move. Is it an overpay? Maybe they could have gotten some value out of trading a T. Higgins to a team like a Patriots or something like that. Maybe brought in a first-round pick. Maybe brought in a second-round pick and a first-round pick next year. Who knows? But keeping Joe Burrow happy isn't a totally bad idea. It allows Joe Burrow to have faith in the franchise. And he was pleading, even from once they missed the playoffs, for the Bengals to get a deal done with Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins. So I'm not surprised that they got this done. I'm surprised that they got it done at the same time, but I felt like they probably told T. Higgins that they were doing one thing, Ja'Marr Chase that they were doing another. Obviously, they gave Ja'Marr more because he's their wide receiver 1, and unfortunately, they sold Higgins short, especially on the price he probably deserves. But oh well, that's life in the big city there. Do I believe that this improves where the Bengals are going to be compared to last year? No. I mean, clearly you're just bringing back a lot of the same core pieces. Yes, you could perform better, especially if you get off to a hotter start than you guys did last season. And if you bring in back Trey Hendrickson, which are rumors that they are currently talking to him to try to get a deal done, I wouldn't be surprised if they're close to the playoffs again or a wild card seed. But as of right now, they're going to have to show me that they can knock off the Ravens, which they struggled to do last season. But they're going to have to show me that they're better than the Ravens. Joe Burrow is can outperform Lamar when it matters most. And we have to see the 2021 Bengals, if 2021, 2022, 2023 Bengals. That's if they even want to make a run at a Super Bowl. But they're also going to have to fill in at other positions. I feel like running back might be fine. It wouldn't hurt to bring in another guy to pair along with Chase Brown. And defense has too many holes, especially in the secondary, in my opinion, that they're going to have to solve in order to not, completely fail on that front. So, with all that being said, it's a good idea. It's a good first step for a franchise that struggles to really, well, especially over the past 30 years, a franchise that has struggled to keep a lot of their pieces together and keep them happy, pay guys that deserve them. They should have gotten this deal done earlier because the price tag probably would have been a lot lower. But at the end of the day, they got it done. They brought back pieces that Joe Burrow wanted. Now it's on these core three on offense to really try to make things click and try to bring a Super Bowl back to the city of Cincinnati. Would I be surprised if it's the Bengals in the Super Bowl next year? If Joe Burrow can play the way that he did in the second half of last season, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals win it all. But they need to start out hot, and they need the second half of last season to be the entire season of this season. So we'll see, but it is a good first step, especially for a team that's looking to take a shot at a Super Bowl within the next 2 years. They need to, before they have to start paying other people. Quickly touching on some news about Aaron Rodgers. Currently, so for the first week of free agency, it was heavily rumored that he was going to be going to the Steelers and or Giants, and he was just waiting for them to make a decision, or vice versa, them waiting for him to make a decision. Then over the past few days, it was rumored that Aaron Rodgers was in talk with the Vikings to see what they would want to do. And I was kind of weirded out by that, only because it was even last week, I want to say Friday, maybe Saturday, that I heard rumors from sources from the Vikings building that J.J. McCarthy was their guy. They flat out said it, and they even told J.J. McCarthy that. So it's weird to me that they were even contemplating. I mean, yes, Aaron Rodgers is a Super Bowl champion, Hall of Fame quarterback. If he wants to even sit down with you just to talk about what it would look like, you give him the time of day to do that. But I didn't even think the Vikings were the best situation for Rodgers. Rather, I do feel like he'll end up going to Pittsburgh, especially after this morning it getting announced that it was getting announced that that the Vikings were not going to sign Aaron Rodgers. Would I be surprised if... Yeah, it seems like... Okay, so I have a live updating thing in front of me. It says Aaron Rodgers is still in no rush to make a decision. It doesn't mean that he'll make a decision anytime soon. We might get a decision this week, or next month. No one really knows. Rodgers is the only one who knows, and he's not really telling any sources around him. I wouldn't be surprised within the next week we hear that Rodgers signs to the Steelers. That's currently my go-to team right now that I feel like he will sign with. I wouldn't be surprised if he signs with the Steelers. I know Cameron Hayward came out on a podcast, said you're either a Steeler, you either want to be a Steeler, or don't come here. And that's not how this works, Cameron. You've never been on another team besides the Steelers. And although I love the passion, this is free agency here, pal. All right, you have to make... These are decisions that could change your life entirely. Whether you go for a bag in New York, or you sign and try to win another championship at another team. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Rodgers sign a cheap one-year deal with the Steelers to try to make one more run at a Super Bowl while the Steelers window is still primed. I also wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers also try to draft a quarterback in the later rounds just to sit behind Aaron Rodgers and see if they can develop him behind him. Which also means that Russell Wilson, who is still floating out in the void currently, that is free agency for quarterbacks, until Aaron Rodgers makes his decision. Russell Wilson is currently being impacted because everywhere that needs a quarterback is focusing all their assets on Aaron Rodgers. So, I do believe that Russell Wilson will end up going to New York to be a Giant. Not a horrible situation to be, not ideal either. I feel like if the Giants do not take Russell Wilson or do not sign Russell Wilson, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to trade up and draft a quarterback, try to trade up ahead of Cleveland at number 2. Right now, and we'll get into my mock draft next week, but right now I do have the Giants trading up at 1 to draft Cam Ward and Cleveland drafting Shedeur Sanders at number 2. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if Russell Wilson signs to be a backup. I also wouldn't be surprised if the Giants feel like Russ is their guy on a cheap deal and that they can possibly make a push for the playoffs, that they draft the best player available at number 3. But who knows what realistically is going to happen. Alright, so I do want to apologize for the shorter episode this week, but I'm on crunch time this week. I got a lot of stuff that I need to get done. Next week, I'll have another episode coming out, that being the Mock Draft 2.0, where I sit down and I actually do trades instead of having people just sit where they are. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple trades happen. But with all that being said, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Remember to leave a like and subscribe. And also, one last thing. Go Birds.